Hi, I'm Roger Webster. I was principal cornet of Black Dyke, or Black Dyke Mills as they were at the time, from 1988 to 1993, and again from 2000 to 2005. I was principal cornet for all of that time, and also for a short period of time worked at the mill, but not directly for John Foster's. My position was offered at Christmas, or just before Christmas of 1987, whilst I was principal cornet of their rivals Brighouse and Rastrick. I was invited by David Hurst, who was resident conductor at the time and now band manager, and Peter Parks to go to their house along with my wife and have a little chat about the future. And that really set some alarm bells ringing, because they had a great principal cornet at that time, Phil McCann, who was doing a great job, but there was various band politics involved, and the job was offered to me there and then, but I had to wait until May to start. The band were going off to, I think, Japan, or it was Australia for a tour, and they couldn't change the ticket, which they tried to do. Music's always been a part of my life. When I was 10 years old, I joined the junior band at Grimethorpe. Queued up for an instrument, ended up with a tenor horn in the sack, which didn't impress me a great deal, but I was already playing piano at that time. Had been doing for a few years, so music's always been around. And I guess it was only after I joined Black Dyke in '88 that I started to take things serious with music. And when the mill went into financial difficulties when I was working there, I started working as a freelance player and doing work for Boozy and Hawkes Musical Instruments, as they were at that time. And I've worked with them ever since. And I think since 1993, I've been self-employed, working as a musician, including teaching, I guess, lecturing and that sort of thing. Black Dyke's always been a name that was bandied around. I guess not when I was in the junior band, but in 1973 I joined Carlton, Maine, and it was always a name that people say, "Oh, the Dyke are there, the Dyke have played well, the Dyke have done this." And I remember once being at a contest, the Yorkshire area, and someone said, "Oh, look, we were sat in a bar, I was sat in the corner having a Coke, underage, and someone said, 'Oh, that's Jim Shepherd.' And I remember staring at this guy as he walked through the bar, and it was like it was some sort of demigod going through, and I thought, I'll go and speak to him, and no words came out. I just sort of walked by him and then told everybody, "Oh, I've seen Jim Shepherd." I was really excited. It didn't mean anything to my family. Well, there wouldn't have been a band without the mill, and Foster's right into the 90s supported the band. Neil Foster, who was the grandson of John Foster, I think he was the last member of the family that was associated with the band in any strong way. I remember him coming on tour with the band. We went to Japan, and it was sort of a honeymoon for him. He'd just got married, and he came with the band, which was probably a bit of a culture shock for him, travelling with 30 musicians, or 30 brass band musicians anyway. But yeah, it's been a long association, and a great one. A memorable performance or event for me really started with a performance in Japan. I remember being on stage, and it was quite a strange sensation. It could have been a bit of jet lag, I don't know what it was, but I remember being sat on stage, and this thought came through my head: you're playing with Black Dyke. And it was quite an emotional feeling. I sat there thinking, I'm sat in Phil McCann, Jim Shepherd, Maurice Murphy's, Willie Lang's seat. What am I doing here? How am I getting away with this? And I missed bars and bars out of the piece we were playing, because I just couldn't get this thought of, I'm sat on stage in a Black Dyke uniform. It was quite emotional. I think in my time with the band, they were all characters, quite outspoken, volatile at times, and some real gentlemen. One being the band secretary at the time, Fred Ellis. It didn't matter. When we travelled to Japan, we all looked dishevelled and a mess when we got off the plane at the other end. Fred looked like he'd just stepped out of Burton's window. He was immaculately dressed. His shirt didn't have a crease, and his trousers were perfectly creased down the front, not a wrinkle in sight. He was always the voice of reason, and someone you could look to for a level-headed answer. Quite a few others in the band, which I'll not mention, were less than level-headed, and not always the voice of reason, but at least they were characters, strong opinions. I think they've all influenced me in different ways, some positive, some negative, but you can take things away from every experience. Working with Peter Parks was for me an iconic conductor, and will always be a big name associated with Black Dyke. That was great just for the experience of working with him. I think I probably worked with him at the wrong time in both our careers, but people like Jim Watson, so charismatic, he'd tell you something, and whether you believed it or not, you wanted to believe it because he sold it to you. And working with him on stage, he was so musical. Just a big character that you wanted to play for. And other guests, I guess, people like, not exactly with Black Dyke, but an ex-Black Dyke conductor, Jeffrey Brand. Old-fashioned, what I would describe as proper musicians, and great to work with. You always learnt something from them. Ooh, great players. They were all good players. Sandy Smith on tenor horn, such a beautiful, creamy, musical player. It was every note said something to you when he played. Pete Christian on baritone. You don't often think, when you think of great players, you don't often mention baritone, but Pete was a great player. And the guy that sat next to him, John Slinger, didn't say a lot. When he did, it usually meant something. But again, a great musician. He'd been all around the band as a player. Again, for a short time, John. There were so many. They were good players. Mark Frost on bass trombone, stunning musician. My first stint with Black Dyke, 88 to 93, there were probably about, if you take all the good days, that there weren't problems, there's probably about 6 months of trouble-free banding in my first period. When I joined the band, which was quite an awkward time, I guess, I was brought into the band room one particular night after the last incumbent of the seat had been removed of his position. And I walked through the curtains, as they were at that time, into the band room to a lot of scowling faces. The majority of the band didn't know who I was, didn't want me there. They were upset that the last player had been dismissed. And I had to sit down and rehearse a concert programme, 2 of the pieces being cornet solos, which they were getting ready for a tour. Not my choice of solos either, they were the last player's solos. So trouble, yes, constant in that period of time. And the second period, I was there 5 years, and I guess I should have stayed 2 years really, because the last 3, I was probably bored, and the conductor was probably troubled by my boredom in the band, questioning things. So I guess out of that period, I should have stayed 2 years, and I stayed 5, overstayed my welcome. Again, I think anyone that's played in Black Dyke takes so much away with them. They get so much from that experience. No one can ever take it away. You've played with Black Dyke, you've experienced it, but also it does open doors. If people know that you've played at Black Dyke, they assume many things, rightly or wrongly. And for me, it's an experience that, whether I loved or hated most of it, it's one that I do cherish. It was great for me, and it's allowed me to do other things. It took me back to college, for one thing. It took me back to music college and did a master's with Phil Wilby, who was associated with the band. I wouldn't have done that otherwise. I'd have carried on just doing my playing, and then from that I went on to do it. I did the psychology after that. Again, not associated with that, but I think I've seen so many troubled minds associated with bands. It did push me a certain direction. So yeah, thanks Black Dyke. It's a yardstick as far as I'm concerned, Black Dyke. Black Dyke's been around and a successful band for so long that people like to measure themselves against Black Dyke. It doesn't matter how many bands come and go and win competitions, bands want to measure themselves against a band like Black Dyke. So, we got 3rd, but Black Dyke were 4th. It's almost, it goes hand in hand that we won and Black Dyke were there, or we were 2nd, but it was only Black Dyke that bet us. It's just one of those things. It's always there, and you want to measure yourself against the very best, which has always been Black Dyke. I think industrially, it was always around. So the mills, the motor works, the foundries, the coal mines, they all had their bands. And although it was in many ways just to keep the workers out of the pubs, that's one of the main reasons, give them something to do. It was social identity as well. Then it became competitive, mill against mill, or mine against mine. Who's got the best players? Who can attract the best players? And that culture it just grew and grew, and people turned it really from something to keep them out of the pubs to a real passion and a lifestyle. I think there's been a change in recent years. I mean, bands have always had youth projects, youth bands. It's nothing new. But I think in recent times there's been a recognition that unless we ourselves get off our chairs, to put it politely, and do something about it, it will die. And bands are taking responsibility now for building their own youth projects, youth bands, feeder bands for top bands. So we're not just sat around waiting for the local bands to develop and we steal their players. Bands are doing things about it themselves. Black Dyke used to have a great youth band, a great junior band back in the day. But again, I think I wasn't around, obviously, but I remember Jeff Whittam telling me that the reason that the mill put a stop to it was something to do with the quality of the junior band becoming so good they were going to have 2 competing bands in the top section, and they weren't going to fund that. But times have changed. Perhaps it's time that there was a Black Dyke junior band. For me, music opens doors. It gives people life experience. You get to meet and mix with people of all ages, all educational standards. It's a great learning experience, and it's a nurturing experience, and in most cases it's a safe and nurturing environment. I would say to any parent or to any child thinking about it, do it. It's great. You'll not regret it. Yes, you have to put some work in, but if you do it with the right guidance, the right teachers, and there are some great teachers out there, then it can be a fantastic tool for the rest of your life. I mean, I started when I was 10 playing. Look at me now, I'm at 305 or whatever I am. I must look like that to some kids. You still see yourself as a young person until you pass a mirror or sit in the company of young players and realise you have no idea what they're talking about. But I would say go for it. It's great. However many people have been through the door to the famous band room in Queensbury, we go there, we're part of it for a short while, you pass through, you leave, sometimes by your own choice, sometimes by the choice of the band or the musical director. And there are occasions when people have sort of bitter feelings about these things. It happens. It's no good sort of dragging it on. Everyone that's gone through that door wanted to play with that band, and there are so many people in banding that would give their left ear to join that band. I would just say, if you get the opportunity to join Black Dyke or be part of it in any way, do it. Great organisation, fantastic band, and long may it continue.